It's time again for us to dive into the Battle of the Millennium, Pirate versus Ninja, the seafaring symbol of freedom following the Age of Discovery against the almost supernatural covert operatives of feudal Japan. DevBox Incorporated refutes the historical accuracy of both of these statements. This time, we're taking our final look at the Dark Souls trilogy proper with Dark Souls 3. My personal favorite of the trilogy because it has most of my favorite bosses. So, in that case, this should be a wonderful run with absolutely no stress. Right? Or, whatever. Roll the intro. Howdy, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where today we're asking the question of which historical warrior is best suited to take on the lands of Lothric in Dark Souls 3. In that case, let's get straight into it in our generational grudge match. Alright, to start it out, we're following our resident ninja, Hattori Hanzo, once again. This time, we're starting as the thief class for two reasons. One, this starts us off with a dagger that can at least fit the bill for a concealed weapon like a tanto or even a more moderately fitted wakizashi. The second reason, however, is because of a phrase that appears a lot in the Bansen Shukai, especially in the early pages, as the work's author, Fujibayashi Yasutake, makes it clear that the skills of a ninja could easily be conflated with those of a thief, should the ninja in question have no sense of honor or a proper master to serve. Therefore, it is imperative that a true ninja find a master worthy of his services, lest his skills be turned wicked and he become nothing more than a lowly thief. Considering that we start off as unkindled ash, masterless, and even without guidance until leaving the graveyard, the thief class sounds like a perfect fit. As for Udik's Gundyr, we get a couple advantages here, with the bandit knife's bleed doing work against the boss. The speed of the weapon itself cannot be discounted either, as it allows me to rip right through him from start to finish. It could be improved by being allowed to parry, but the shield didn't really fit the ninja aesthetic. Not that ninja never used shields, but a European buckler specifically didn't feel quite right for the job. What does help instead is our black firebombs that we took as a starting gift. This absolutely chews up Gundyr in the second phase. I mean, it doesn't have the same effect it would have on the pus of man creatures we'll fight later on, but it at least does enough damage to end the phase quickly. We'll see this phase again in Elden Ring when part of that design returns as the ulcerated tree spirit. And now we get to Cervantes, our resident pirate, for the ongoing competition. There are a few classes that might work for this one, like the mercenary with his sellsword twin blades, or even the thief like the ninja. However, looking through the list, the assassin is what calls out the most pirate-like for the time being. What with his estoc, which is the most fitting weapon for the time period of the golden age of piracy. I'd certainly love a real cutlass here, and the estoc over other rapiers is a bit long to be wearing on a ship in the 17th century, but like with Hanzo's bandit knife, Cervantes will have to use an accuracy adjacent weapon here. Likewise, while the buckler would certainly make for an improved experience against Gundyr, it hardly fits the vibe check for a pirate. We're looking more for a dagger to hold in our offhand, or even better, some type of gun. Granted, we haven't seen that since Bloodborne, and won't be seeing it for the rest of this competition, so that's unfortunate. We'll find something in the meantime, though. We'll get there. So, what does this mean for Gundyr? Well, the fight doesn't go bad, and the damage on the estoc is pretty good, but the weapon is a bit slower than I might have expected for a rapier to be, and I'm really not a fan of that cross/R2. Massive time waste for a weapon that already feels like it should be stabbing way faster than it does. Still, we make do, and the black firebombs once again melt the second phase before it can even come close to being dangerous. So we've at least got that going for us. So far, we've got two fighters using relatively fast weapons, no greatswords or whatever. This makes the competition pretty close. However, the speed of the bandit's knife really makes it a different kind of beast. Honestly, as a dagger doubter for years, I'm surprised to find that I'm giving it the edge over the estoc. But the difference really shows itself against the boss, but even greater so against the ravenous crystal lizard found towards the beginning of the cemetery. Even without the bleed coming into effect against this guy, since it's immune to the status effects, the bandit knife still comes out over the estoc in raw DPS. In that case, this is a point for Ninja, and we're setting a pretty bad precedent for the decision to start with a rapier for Cervantes. But this fortunately won't be a problem for long. Real quick before we get into the rest of the run, I want to take about a minute to tell you about a new channel that we've started here at DevBox. It's called Retro Respect, and it's the new home for the retrospective series that used to be available here. The original videos have been unlisted, though you can still watch them all now through the playlist, and we'll be uploading onto the new channel once a week until everything has caught up. Then the first new video should be available on June 16th. Bit of a strange day, but there are reasons that will be explained when that video releases. And all future Retro Respects will be uploading only on the new channel from then on. I'm hoping this will help that series and this channel, as trying to host it here only hurts the potential of those videos and winds up hurting this channel in return. So for the longevity of both channels, which I want to keep working on both of them in tandem, I'll be keeping them separated after the move is finished. In that case, if you're interested in me dissecting some old games like From Software's PS2 classic Evergrace, Square Enix's PS2 masterpiece Final Fantasy X, or even my favorite games of all time, Game Arts' Lunar series, then click on the link in the iCard or in the description. Okay, back to the regularly scheduled generational grudge match. Oh, and if you're not subbed to DevBox, then go ahead and consider subbing over here as well. I can feel that golden play button right around the corner, and I'd love to get 2 by the time summer starts. Also, like and comment and all the algorithm stuff. Okay, thanks. Going back for real now. Our first step out towards the next boss is to grab a weapon that better fits the bill of the ninja. In this case, we're going for the Uchigatana, which we can get from the Swordmaster NPC right off to the side of Firelink Shrine. The fight honestly goes pretty easy for the ninja, as the dagger can get in some attacks before the Swordmaster is able to get his swings off. Likewise, the lack of poise in DS3 winds up working in my favor here, as the bandit's knife can keep the NPC stun-locked long enough to get off a bleed me. It's rough, but we get it done. As we feel out the Uchigatana in the high wall of Lothric and eventually against Vordt, let me take this opportunity to completely address the egg smearing all over my face when it comes to my aversion to letting the ninja wield the katana after the DS1 run. This comes in 2 parts. Part 1 comes from my conflating of the myth of the ninjato with the reality of ninja weapons from feudal Japan. Essentially because I personally tend to associate the image of ninja more with smaller concealable weapons, or more stylized kits like the kusarigama or the kunai. I tend to write off the likelihood of a ninja taking a full-on Uchigatana into battle, instead wanting to always keep it to something more in line with the tanto or a wakizashi. And while wakizashi were certainly a favored weapon when infiltrating and concealment was the priority of a mission, that doesn't mean that a ninja wouldn't have a katana or even a yari, or spear, to bring into battle. The second part comes from a media misinterpretation that I've kept of ninjas for a long time. That being of the ninja being a type of stealth class or soldier that rose up specifically from the peasant class and opposed to the samurai class. This is a very popular media interpretation for the sake of storytelling and goes far back in Japanese theater and cinema. One of the most notable examples would be from the 1962 film Shinobi no Mono, which depicts the ninja as underdog assassins fighting against the power and status of the feudal era samurai. However, this interpretation is completely anachronistic from the reality of ninja in feudal Japan. As stated by Fujibayashi himself in the Bansen Shukai, a glorified job application touting the benefits of enlisting ninja clans in warfare written during a relatively peaceful Edo period of Japan, a ninja's basic skills of combat, horseback riding, and archery should all be considered a given, because ninja should be chosen among those in the samurai class who excel in these areas, as well as some social skills that will aid in a ninja's missions. So yeah, when I say things like, the origins of most ninja technique comes from the peasant class, with my whole chest, I've been absolutely incorrect, and the ninja should instead be known as part of the samurai class with specialized skills, tools, and techniques. It's certainly something I learned from media, had reiterated to me by someone else who also had formed the misconception from media, and then continued to pass it on incorrectly. Hopefully by owning up to that mistake here, and in some pinned comments on some previous videos, I can clarify my error and regain some of the trust that I've certainly lost for speaking with authority on a subject that I myself was heavily misinformed on. Anyway, for the actual gameplay, the Uchigatana is pretty sick at this point. The katana class of weapons are already among my favorites in the entire Dark Souls series, so it shouldn't really be a surprise that I'm having a great time here. But yeah, this is working out very well for me. And against Vordt specifically, the Uchigatana cleans up. It's the perfect combination of fast and powerful, and with a couple upgrade levels in it already, it barely even needs the bleed me's to get through this fight on the first try. But Vordt is super easy, barely an inconvenience. We always knew we were going to stomp this guy no matter the weapon. Alright, it's Cervantes' turn to take on the High Wall of Lothric, and before we even get there, maybe my showcase against the Swordmaster can show how much I don't like rapier weapons. Tiny bit of my own personal bias really thumbing the scale here for sure, but the S-Stock is not going to be winning any awards in my hands. Still, we get through Vordt even if the vibes at this point were so bad that I legitimately wrote into my notes that this took more than one attempt. Even though I actually got it on my first try, the S-Stock is weak, the narrow hitbox misses Vordt at point-blank range sometimes, and without additional status effects to add extra damage, this is a damn war of attrition against Vordt. So, this is already turning out to be a rough matchup, and I should immediately address another aspect that is thumbing the scale in both ways at this point in the run. Basically, I run these builds one after the other, meaning that after having the endgame ninja build, I immediately swap over to the pirate and need to start getting used to having base health, stamina, and damage all over again. Considering how absolutely goated Hanzo is going to be by the end of this run, it's a pretty heavy stressor to suddenly be using a weapon I don't like on a new character that can't take a hit to save his life. Parts of this will diminish as the run goes on, both as I take a break in the middle of the pirate run and as Cervantes starts to level and get some new gear. Like the light crossbow he's already picked up. It probably won't see much use in the future, but hey, at least we have it. Anyway, Point Ninja, he's getting a quick head start because of his Uchi Katana. As we head into Undead Settlement for both Hanzo and Cervantes, we'll be checking some items off the lists, like picking up Yhorm, who will be important for Hanzo but not Cervantes, killing the demon with Sigvard, who will be important for both, and even freeing Cornix from his cage and recruiting him to Firelink, who will be useless for both characters. It's a lot, as Undead Settlement gives us a lot of room to breathe at this point, which can bring us to one of 3 possible bosses right away. For now though, we'll start by heading to the curse-rotted Greatwood. So, Hanzo does pretty well against the curse-rotted Greatwood. This is mostly a gimmick fight anyway, but at least the Uchi Katana has little issue with aiming for the pustulous lumps in order to play the part of the Dr. Pimple Popper and get the win. The bow on my back also certainly helps as well. Once again, this bow is about as close as we'll get to the Yumi, a classic style of bow for samurai and ninja alike. In this case, the bow is helpful for taking out some of the out-of-reach pustules that can take this fight down pretty fast. Gotta say, this fight is a great showcase for how good the bow can be in this game, at least it is in the early game. One major change for Cervantes before we get to the boss is that we've upgraded our wardrobe. While the assassin drip is plenty piratey, picking up the Mira outfit gives us the same pirate garb we wore for the DS2 playthrough, because naturally, the best designs in DS3 actually come from DS2. Lead artist Keiichiro Ogawa and the rest of the character art team really outdid themselves back there. And thanks to DS3, we can actually appreciate their work in a good game. Sorry DS2 fans, I'm contractually obligated to shit on your game at least once a video. Satan doesn't deliver the organic views for nothing. Regardless, the Mira hat isn't here, so we'll need to get a different one to finish out our set. Oh wait, this wasn't here, it was back in Firelink. Yeah, we killed Lenny for his tricorn hat and silver mask, although we really only want the hat. Fun fact, when I originally did my Adrian Bowman run and wore his stuff, it was because I really liked the outfit and thought it was kinda fitting for an archer. But I had no idea that it was actually a skin for the archer in Night Rain, because I haven't played Night Rain and have no real drive to check it out. It's not my style of game, it's not really a critique or anything like that. So that was some amazing serendipity that I absolutely would have capitalized on if I'd known when I was working on that video. As for the actual boss of the area, the S-Stock struggles a bit against the curse-rotted Greatwood. We see the most struggle trying to go for the pimple in the boss's hand, made even worse by the fact that it keeps disappearing into the floor. However, this is the first case of the thrusting sword really struggling to land hits, as the hitbox and the arc of the attack are both very narrow. Maybe if the attacks were faster to make up for the lack of hitbox area, that might do something, but it's not especially fast either. We do get a few good hits with our bow, a tool that surprisingly still saw plenty of use during the mast and cannon era of the Age of Discovery and Golden Age of Piracy. Turns out the more consistent accuracy and faster reload of the bow kept it competitive against the flintlock pistols and muskets at the time, especially for sniping ship to ship from a distance. However, after this fight, it'll be getting relegated to a backup plan for luring out enemies and won't be seen in much boss combat anymore. Fun side note, did you know that DS3 let you aim with a crossbow as long as you two-hand it? Because I didn't know that, and wouldn't for a while. Might be a bit of a spoiler, but that knowledge is coming up and I'll figure it out about... So, when all is said and done, the S-Stock struggling here is pretty minor, and the advantage of the Uchigatana only barely edges out the other weapon. That being said, the rest of the fight being a gimmick means that most of the fight is about knowledge rather than kit. In that case, this will be a point for Ninja, since even a minor advantage is still an advantage in this kind of encounter. While the next boss on the list is the Crystal Sage, both characters will take this time to comb through the Road of Sacrifices and Farron Keep for any upgrade materials we can find. This means Estus shards, Undead Bone shards, and most importantly, Titanite shards. In fact, both get enough to get their initial weapon up to +3, although we'll see that this isn't entirely relevant for Hanzo in a moment. Otherwise, we'll have taken out the Stray Demon and picked up the Dream Chaser's ashes before heading in to fight the Crystal Sage for both Hanzo and Cervantes. One note specific to Hanzo, however, is the fact that we've now sacrificed our beautiful skin to Yol in order to get Yuria of Londor to spawn. Granted, we're not here for her shop or her murder questline. Instead, we're here to kill her for her weapon. That's right, we're getting the... Like I was saying, we're getting the... Okay, well, this is rough, and it goes on for a while. Master, look, I've done it. I've done it. I smashed and pounded and grounded this rotten siren into fleshy pink pulp. There, you filthy monstrosity. What good's your immortality now? Try stirring up trouble in this sorry state, all mangled and twisted with every inside on the outside, for all the world to see. Sorry about that. Got a little heated. Anyway, we're finally getting the Dark Drift, an old favorite from our DS2 playthrough. Upgrading with Twinkling Titanite, this is a weapon that has the potential to get stronger than most other weapons at a much accelerated pace. But DS3 is really stingy on handing these materials out, so for now, we're running into the Crystal Sages at +1. Still, a +1 Dark Drift is currently stronger than a +3 Uchigatana. So we'll take it and go. And go we do, as Dark Drift completely dominates Crystal Sage. Look at that damage. The game can't even keep up with it, as my game drops frames while I start destroying the boss. 2 teleports later, and the Crystal Sage is quickly down. Hanzo's starting to lean into goated build status at this point, and we're only 3 bosses in. And we're only 4 bosses in. Alright, we've got the last chance for the S-Stock to earn itself a solid point against the katanas, and I'm not gonna lie, but the damage is not raising much confidence. Although, more than the damage is the ability to stagger the Crystal Sage, something that I've never really noticed until watching these 2 runs back to back. Being able to keep the Crystal Sage in one place can be a huge advantage, and with rapiers really falling off with respect to their stagger or flinch potential, this really doesn't go too well for Cervantes. In all honesty, this is a matter of this weapon specifically being a bad match for the fight at hand. Similarly bad is also the crossbow in my offhand. I've been using this as my flintlock stand-in for the entire series, and this was quite the learning moment for that weapon in DS3, because I figured that having some quick range to take out the Sage copies might give Cervantes an edge here. But DS3 had other plans for me. As it turns out, Miyazaki, in his infinite wisdom, decided to nerf the crossbow, the already worst weapon class in the entire series. Like, I think the Astora Straight Sword is bad? Nah man, this ass is unmatched. See, while previous games made crossbows weak, not scale with damage, and slowly reload after each shot fired, DS3 decided to add salt to the wound, forcing the player to actually press the firing input a second time in order to reload before firing again. So gone are the days of fire, wait for the reload, fire again. Now it's press fire, wait for the bolt to actually launch, press fire again to spend the next fiscal years filing paperwork to have a new bolt loaded into the crossbow, then press fire again in order to actually send the next bolt in sequence. It seems like a minor change, but it slows the already horrendously slow weapon down by a considerable amount, and will get you caught if you aren't expecting the change. But hey, at least the damage is still shit and doesn't scale in the fastest Dark Souls game. So no question, this one is a point to Ninja. For one, because the damage of the Dark Drift at +1 is already overtaking any other +3 normal weapon, but also because of the stagger against the Crystal Sage. Better in every way, and Cervantes is really going to need a miracle to start catching up here. An interesting new note for the Dark Drift is in the weapon art attached to it. Gone is the hold skill with its Iaito-style quick draw, or parry. Instead, we get a piercing strike that can hammer through shields like they aren't even there, for nothing can stop what cannot be seen. The point is, Dark Drift is a perfect ninja weapon. Deceptive, basically concealable, pretending to be nothing more than katana fittings rather than the weapon itself, and capable of piercing through whatever defenses an enemy might have. After all, that was the primary purpose of the ninja, to dive beyond the defenses of an enemy fortification, either through covert stealth or even cunning social engineering. The result is a weapon that makes pretty quick work of the Cathedral of the Deep, and even lets me head into the Painted World DLC without much issue at the moment. We're here to grab a weapon that will come up later, but I'll leave that a little secret until we get there. For now, we're fighting the Deacons. This one has the potential to be pretty rough for some builds, but the ninja has been ripping through enemies all the way here. So, while a 1-on-50 fight like this should only be possible in those old movies like Shinobi no Mono, DS3 is more than happy to let the ninja feel like an absolute savant on the battlefield, as the Dark Drift cuts right through the whole group. Good damage and enough crowd control to catch multiple Deacons with each swing of the katana. And as the fight jumps into the second phase, the main Deacon being consistently present only makes the fight go all the faster, because now we can cut him down with impunity, and the others barely even manage to make me flinch as I cut down their leader. For Cervantes, we have the chance to pick up a few weapons now that he can also head into the first DLC, and in that case, we're actually going to start using it right away. That's right, we finally got something resembling a proper cutlass, the Follower's Saber. It's a curved blade with a proper handguard, complete with a knuckle bow and everything. That's the little loop that goes over to the knuckles and offers minor protection from slashes that would otherwise disable the hand. Now, for the classic pirate look, I might want something with a more prominent guard, or even a cup or basket hilt that completely encases the main hand, but beggars can't be choosers in Dark Souls land. Besides, it's actually closer to historical accuracy anyway. This is the closest we've gotten to a wieldable cutlass that isn't broken in 5 fucking games, so I'll take this. Of course, we next need to ask how the Follower's Saber actually handles. Well, it kinda rips. This is a major upgrade from the S-Stock. Again, personal preference is going to be a big part of the equation here, and my personal preference is definitely towards curved swords over rapiers. Still, let's see how it fares in a proper boss fight. Oh, Deacons, I've arrived. No, don't stop praying on my account. I'm here to send you to your god now. Hopefully 6 feet is deep enough for you. Well, once we cut through enough of them and then finally make our way to the main Deacon, it seems like it's become their problem to contend with. Honestly, this might be as close to a tie as it gets. I might even be convinced that the damage could push the fight in Hanzo's favor, as the Dark Drift is able to upgrade so quickly thanks to the Twinkling Titanite, and it can therefore overpower plenty of weapons like the Follower's Saber. However, in this case, I'm making a judgment call on vibes. And at this point, the pirate playthrough has moved from a tedious slog with a weapon I abhor to a genuinely fun time with one of my favorite weapon classes. So yeah, it's a biased reason, but it's my competition, and I get to say that this is a point for Pirate. He kinda needs the win anyway. I doubt vibes are going to be enough to carry him to the finish on this playthrough. After having swapped to the Dark Drift, there's a part of me that misses the stance that comes with the Ujigatana. While this isn't exactly the same unsheath from Elden Ring, Hold still gives me a lot of opportunity to prepare a lightning-fast attack for the proper time, and also deals heavy stance damage when I land the R1 with its Iaido-like quick draw. And that's not to mention how nice it is for the Ujigatana to come with its own version of parry, even when we don't have a shield. However, I'm really enjoying the Dark Drift skill, which is basically a piercing strike. Like I mentioned before, it can blast through shields and ignore the guard. However, against a boss like the Abyss Watchers, it has a nice secondary effect, that being that it can close the distance on the boss extremely quickly. It doesn't come up much in the first phase while I'm spending most of my time trying not to get overwhelmed by the extra Watchers, but in the second phase, it can help me get into range past the boss's massive greatsword that he throws around like it's not a giant slab of metal. We're also doing killer damage here since we're already at +2 on the Dark Drift thanks to the Twinkling Titanite that we've found so far. Altogether, it's a beast of a weapon and it carries us through a number of close calls against the Abyss Watchers for a first try win. As far as unique skills for the Follower Saber, we've got a decent little L2 that's capable of knocking enemy shields off to the side, but it's not really that different from most curved swords. Still, at this point we're up to +4 thanks to finding some large Titanite shards around, so the damage is pretty good against the Abyss Watchers. It's nothing too wild to write home about, but it's certainly a nice little weapon to take through the game. I couldn't really ask for more, as it's a pretty solid sword that makes for a nice casual playthrough. This one is actually kind of an odd one, because my execution of the fight is way better as Cervantes over Hanzo. I take less hits, don't get as close to dying even when I do get hit, and it's a solid back and forth between me and the boss until I triumph after a fun little battle against one of DS3's best bosses. However, it's the damage that speaks the strongest for both classes. In that case though, that damage diff is towards what the Abyss Watchers are dealing to me, not how much I can inflict on them. Yeah, we haven't really talked about my clothes much since the focus tends to be on the weapons in these runs, but Hanzo has been naked this entire run. For one, because he's got the Flynn ring on, and his damage is being boosted by not wearing armor, but also because his actual clothes are pretty deep into the game, so he's been taking a lot more damage from every hit against every boss, including the Abyss Watchers. Cervantes' Mirah armor might not exactly be Havel's fucking rock plate, but it's enough to give him better survivability between the two playthroughs. So yeah, this is a point to pirate in kind of a photo finish that I wouldn't have noticed without checking the tapes back and forth. My RNG with Wolnir has been immaculate lately. GG, easy. Once again, great RNG. GG, easy. Giving this point to Wolnir for being a bro and letting my boys through. Thanks, pal. We've got another GG easy boss, but I refuse to do the bit a second time. Why? Because I'm not a hack. I'm an amateur. Plus, it was 3 minutes. Anyway, old Demon King. He's a healthy boy and certainly doesn't go down as quickly as someone like Wolnir or Abyss Watchers. Does this mean that he's actually difficult? Well, he can catch me a bit, but it's not like I'll be dumb enough to get burned by his spreading ground fire or something. Regardless, we get through on a first try and move on, obviously. Couldn't imagine dying to this guy anymore at this point. Get to the score. Yeah, that's a point to Ninja. Was it a bullshit death? Felt like it at the time, but that doesn't stop it from having happened, and Cervantes needs to get punished for it. And we're on to Pontiff Sulyvahn. I thought this guy was supposed to be hard. Well, not when I've got a Dark Drift in my hand. Ignore the blood stain in the corner there. That's that was practice. Yeah, that was a practice run. Not like a real attempt or anything. See? Like it never happened. Whatever, we killed the guy on a second try, okay? Sue me, it's Sulyvahn. You first tried this asshole without parries. Even Cervantes falls victim to the curse of Sulyvahn's endless combos. Or maybe he's suffering from my own panic rolls. Probably both. Let's go with both. Spread the blame around a bit. Anyway, on a second try, after taking out a certain NPC invader for reasons that will be clear later, but for now is an otherwise needless detour, so let's hurry back to the fight. Alright, into the actual successful run, and the real key here appears to be patience, because there's no real way to muscle through his damage, even as I use charcoal pine resin to help me power through the first phase. Fire is a plentiful enough weapon for a pirate. I mean, the dudes were so lit they wielded firearms. But yeah, none of the other resins feel thematically appropriate, and using the charcoal here gives the follower's saber a slight edge over the dark drift, or at least helps Cervantes to close that gap. He needs every advantage he can get, and pretty soon Hanzo is going to steal this one from him. So let the pirate have a little boosting while he's got an advantage to press. Wow, this one is practically a photo finish. Both Hanzo and Cervantes beat Sulyvahn in a little over 2 minutes on the second attempt. About 2 minutes 15 seconds for anyone curious about the exact timings. If the charcoal pine resin had managed to last longer, or I could have applied it more frequently, this might have gone to Cervantes in the end, but that is part of the limitation of his kit. So yeah, this is a solid tie. Points for both, with some extra firepower helping to break the distance between a twinkling and non-twinkling weapon. Alright, it's time to take on Yhorm the Giant, the bane of the existence of any challenge run. A gimmick boss whose gimmick weapon can't be picked up by either competitor. Prepare for 2 horrific wars of attrition against a boss so tanky, he redefines what it means to be Oh, hey Sigvard. Thanks for the assist. Oh, hi Sigvard. Thanks for the assist. But piratey this time. Yeah, it's a pretty obvious point to Sigvard for being a bro. Thanks, Sigvard. Oh look, it's Aldrich. Not a terrible fight in general, but fuck this bow attack specifically. Remove that and this fight is fine. Fuck this bow attack, but more piratey. Is it obvious that this format loses steam by this point in the video? Especially as neither competitor bothers to change their weapons for so long. It's been Dark Drift versus Follower Saber for like 7 bosses at this point. What much else is there to say about them that the other bosses haven't covered about the build? To be honest, both of these weapons are pretty even, at least when both characters are dumping points into dex, and we've infused the Follower Saber with a sharp gem in order to boost its scaling. And again, we have another photo finish, which is kind of surprising, because I definitely expected Dark Drift to win easily because of the ease of upgrading with Twinkling Titanite. But Cervantes and his Cutlass have been putting in work to keep this fight pretty neck and neck for the last few bosses. So yeah, point to both, because this was another 2.5 minute fight for each, and neither really felt like it was more in control than the other from moment to moment. Certainly doesn't help that Aldrich loves to stall with that stupid arrow attack. Did you know if you don't immediately talk to the dead handmaiden lady, you can spend your Aldrich and or Yhorm souls without immediately starting the dancer fight? Because I didn't. We really are never done learning new things about these games. Also, that really goes to show that taking a minute to sit back and not immediately charge headfirst into every wall pays dividends. If only I had patience. Once Hanzo gets into the fight, it doesn't exactly go the cleanest. Like, it's a pretty easy path through the first phase, but once we get into phase 2 and Dancer has both swords out, it gets pretty rough. Not to mention whatever the fuck this attack is. Yeah, really not sure if this is instability damage or something, because I might have been caught mid-roll, but that is crazy to see the sword drag attack basically one-shot me, even with a health bar as chunky as mine. Still, on a second attempt, we get a much better feel for the fight and make sure to keep our distance when we're not as confident about our dodges, like against the spin to win she does at the start of the second phase. After that, it's a quick set of strikes before Dancer goes down to the power of the Dark Drift. That damage is still incredible to see, even now that we're getting into the end game. This fight actually goes a lot cleaner for Cervantes. For one, we never die, so that first try definitely gives him some extra credit here. But then there's also the way that I make it through most of the fight without ever taking a single hit. Then the whole concept of not taking hits completely goes out the window and I get blasted to hell. Still, the fight even gives me some opportunities to get some crossbow shots in, so that's certainly something. Few bosses actually give us the time to pull the bad boy out, so I get to actually feel like a pirate with the cutlass in one hand and flintlock in the other. That really hasn't been the case until now. Well, the first time kill makes this one pretty clear, but I also really want to stress how nice it was to actually get a handful of damage opportunities with my crossbow. The thing has been on Cervantes' back for most of this playthrough because it is so terrible in DS3. Truly an abysmal weapon class. I don't know what Miyazaki has against crossbows, but dude did them so dirty. Anyway, that's a point for Pirate, since his whole kit got to shine, and of course, Dancer never managed to kill him. With Dancer dead, it's about damn time that Hanzo gets to put on some damn clothes. Because hidden away under a bridge in the Consumed King's garden, we can find the Shadow set, along with a set of claws. Seems like they're trying to imply that claws would be a solid choice for a ninja weapon. Well, I've already done a claw-only run, so I might not use these quite yet, but we'll see. They do at least fit for the concept of the shuko. Granted, those are smaller and worn on the inside of the palm instead of on the outside like these Wolverine-style hook claws. That being said, there is a variation of the shuko known as the tekagi shuko, which translates roughly to hook hands, which would basically equate to those hook claws. Again, these big Wolverine claws are much more based in fiction than actual history, but they do show up in a lot of ninja or ninja-adjacent media, like Naruto, or as a weapon for the only character in Street Fighter that uses a weapon, and from us Americans, some Foot Clan soldiers in TMNT are known to rock these bad boys. Still, we're only here for the clothes, and then we can go take on Dragonslayer Armor. With proper attire equipped, we immediately die to Dragonslayer Armor. My goodness, that was fast. Okay, rematch. Let's see if we can dodge that combo a bit better. I still struggle the most against that shield, I'll be honest. I'm really not good at reacting to the quick strike or even the smash that has a little more wind up. Then there's his guard counter if you try attacking through his shielding. That thing always feels like it tracks me down perfectly, and I do not know the timing to dodge it, but patience and some decent damage still coming from Dark Drift later, and we make it through on our second try. Not terrible, I've definitely gotten hard stuck on this dude longer than this. Well, at least Cervantes made it to phase 2 before being immediately flattened by Dragonslayer Armor. Twice. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen that air slice attack before in my life. Like, I don't think I've ever been hit by it, or even backed off far enough for him to even attempt the attack. I completely thought I was safe from this distance. I was more afraid that the incomplete butterflies were going to hit me, not the boss's wild swing from across the arena. On a third attempt, though, yep, another death, the pirate finally pulls out the win on my fourth attempt, which is the longest any of these fights have taken in both playthroughs at this point. Our last bout is a nail biter from start to finish, and I elect to never bother using an ember on the final attempt, which is fine since I only wind up needing a single Estus to get through the fight. Sometimes when it clicks, man, it clicks. Only wish it had clicked, 4 attempts ago. Yeah, this is probably more on my execution than the actual build, as we've seen that both the Follower Saber and the Dark Drift are pretty neck and neck, especially when I start pulling out the resins. That being said, my execution as Cervantes was pretty bad, so this is a pretty easy point for Ninja, to be honest. It's actually surprisingly been quite a while since he took one for himself that wasn't a tie in this matchup. So, turns out Dark Drift can also be buffed with fire, which kind of extends that gap between Hanzo and Cervantes, because this thing absolutely devours Lorien. Honestly, I expected this fight to be a nightmare, because the Twin Princes have caused me quite a bit of suffering in some of my recent playthroughs. However, while it gets close a few times, Lorien is surprisingly more passive than he normally is against me. Like, I've seen him do this before, so it's not news, but I've gotten wailed on so much by this dude recently that a first try kill was not what I was expecting here. Oh, yeah. No, there we go. That's what I was expecting. Okay, second try, and we can actually keep our cool during the second phase. I don't know if the addition of Lothric really makes this so much harder that it always kills me, or if it's the stress of not being done with Lorien in a timely manner that is the problem. Because dodging the projectiles is fine. Like, I take some stray hits, don't get me wrong, but it's the teleporting sword swipes that cause the real problem here. Otherwise, the younger brother causes little trouble as we beat down the bigger boy again. The Follower Saber is extremely powerful, especially after infusing it with Sharp. And this is after having run out of charcoal resin. At this point, we've also hit plus 10 basically as soon as we got into Lothric Castle. There's enough Titanite chunks scattered around to get 2 weapons up to plus 10 in fact. And would you look at that, we've also got a new second weapon, the Avalon. Those familiar with the weapon from previous games, or when I found it in DS1, will be pleased to know that it performs about the same here. One trigger pull fires 3 bolts, and while the damage on each individual bolt is less than most other crossbows, the total damage if all 3 hit is usually a bit better. Granted, it also sucks up 3 times the ammo, so if I'm trying to get the most bang for my buck on each bolt, it might not be the best choice when we have DS3's ammo restrictions. Regardless, it doesn't really come into play against the Twin Princes, since the Follower Saber does more than enough work to never need the crossbow. Also, crossbows suck, and the Avalon is no exception. Anyway, first try kill, pretty sick. Turns out, Dex builds absolutely chew up the Twin Princes. Not to mention, there is certainly a benefit to really understanding how getting behind Lothric for each attack will tick down both of them at once. I had fought these two plenty of times before I'd ever realized that Lothric could actually be hit while Lorien is still up. But having that knowledge cuts this fight down in a major way. Weapons with any kind of verticality to their swing also does a lot to help, since that makes it easier to give Lothric his back shots while he rides his brother. It's not a choice, I'm sorry, the joke has to be made every time. Anyway, point for Pirate for getting this done in one. Congrats on the final hurrah of the Cutlass. Now, it's time to do the cleanup of the remaining optional bosses in the base game, before we head into the DLC. For that, we're starting with Oceiros, and Hanzo has a brand new weapon to take into this fight, the Claws. In this case, it's the Crow Talons. I never gave these their real due in my claw-only run, or at least I don't remember doing that, but I did learn way back then that this change in weapon type isn't exactly a major downgrade in DS3. In fact, as we can see with how these things rip apart Oceiros, the Crow Talons are more than capable of ending this false dragon quickly. As for this choice in weapon, yeah, we've mentioned that hook claws are a classic ninja tool, mostly from media, which is to say that their traditional accuracy as a weapon is questionable, but their existence is still possible outside of anime or Shredder's Gauntlets and TMNT. A sick weapon choice though, and I'm so happy that DS3 eventually made this weapon class not only viable, but kinda goated. Actually, DS2 kinda made them pretty good too. The fuck, DS1? Why did these suck back then? As Cervantes heads into the cleanup with Oceiros, he also will be changing weapons. I'm sad to see the Follower Saber go, but we've got another decent weapon for the golden age of piracy to attempt with. While I wasn't the biggest fan of the Estoc, I wanted to see if I might enjoy a different rapier a bit better, which is why we've picked up the Crow Quills in Ariandel. This will do 2 things for us. 1, it will give us another chance to enjoy the rapier type of weapons, or the thrusting sword class if you want to go with the game's specific language, although this is considered a special thrusting sword. 2nd, it can give us something to hold in our other hand that isn't a terrible crossbow I'll never use, that still allows us to have some ranged options. Because the extra daggers we hold in our left hand both acts as a ranged option with the L2, but also as claws with the L1. We've used the offhand dagger style of dual wielding for Cervantes in previous games before, but it's nice to have a weapon that makes specific use of this type of combat. As for the fight, well, I'm sure you've been seeing it, and I really don't know what to say about this. Like, did he get stuck on that wall or something? Or is his AI broken? I don't know, but this is the easiest time I've had with Oceiros ever. Felt like the game was trying to give me a freebie. Crazy. Now, while both warriors might have survived this first run, there is a clear winner, through no fault of his own. For whatever reason, Oceiros was never a threat against Cervantes after a little while, and we got an incredibly simple win on him. So yeah, point Pirate for having the most favorable RNG I have ever seen in my life. And it's Champion Gundyr time. Not gonna lie, this guy is a huge problem for me. I am terrible at timing my dodges on his halberd, and especially on that charge attack he loves to open up the second phase with. All this is to say that this goes surprisingly well for Hanzo. Although, before we start to break down the boss proper, I want to focus on the NPC that invades here for a hot second. Turns out the claws have ridiculous hit stun against NPC or player type enemies, and we can basically hold them in place forever. So yeah, Kriemhild goes down with an L2 and L1 combo. Incredible stuff. Love that for me. Okay, Gundyr, how's that going? Okay, not good, nor great, but we survived that. And you know what? Survival is all that really matters at the end of the day, because that's what we do here. Survive. Well, to start Cervantes' run into the Untended Graves, he does not have nearly as much luck against Crimeheld, because the Rapier is not quite as capable of stun-locking him. Also, she keeps auto-parrying me. Great stuff. Love that. Well, the jumping attack running L1 at least makes this somewhat doable. Okay, boss time. This one clearly won't go as cleanly as Oceiros, and I actually need to learn my weapon in order to get this kill this time. That being said, against Gundyr, I really don't mind the thrusting sword. There's definitely a benefit of the unique L1 moveset of the Crow Quill, but even then, I mostly get through this because the R1s are so powerful. Although this is a pretty by-the-numbers fight against Gundyr, and I never would have expected a Rapier to do that. If I was factoring that Crimeheld fight into the equation, then this would be an easy win for Hanzo. However, we're more focused on the bosses in this competition because it's better for the script, and as far as the bosses go, there really isn't much of a winner. Both took about 1 minute and 40 seconds to get through, both managed to get through the fight in a single attempt, both rocked dex builds that DPS the boss down instead of dealing huge damage with each hit. So yeah, this is another point for both, as there have been a surprising number of ties in DS3. The toolkits are all so good in this game that it's hard for any one build to be objectively better than another. Does Ancient Wyvern even count as a boss? No, I don't think it does. Get wrecked, son. Point, gravity. And this might be the first time the physics in a Souls game has won anything. I honestly expected this to go worse with the claws, although I've already fought him with this type of weapon. I mean, he kills me, but that's to be expected. It's Nameless King. Like, I know some folks have gotten pretty good at fighting him, but this is still the toughest boss in the base game. So dying once is still ahead of the curve. Dying twice though? That one felt like a specific kick in the dick. I'm not gonna lie, but I guess it is exactly in FromSoft's style for Shadows to die twice. And now is my moment to rage bait the comments section by reminding everyone that I really don't like that game. Anyway, when we get back to the Nameless King again, things go troublingly. But we make it through. I will say though that these claws inspire me to take way more risks than I ever need to. That L2 does not belong in this fight, and yet here I go trying to super multi-claw the boss down. It comes close towards the end too, but when it's finished, the ninja makes his way through the fight and stands above any king that comes in his way. Cervantes here is a bit luckier than Hanzo, and I've gotta say, this is probably the most blatant that the second playthrough benefit gets, because I only win because of something I learned from Hanzo's playthrough. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we've got to kill the chicken, and yeah, the Crow Quill is a solid rapier. I don't know what it is about this one that makes it feel better than the S-Stock, but even using its basic moveset is pretty nice. I can even understand why folks enjoy this weapon class if other rapiers feel more like this one over the starting S-Stock. Once we get into the actual Nameless King fight proper, I've also started to get really comfortable with linking the R1 and L1 combos together, specifically going from R1 first to follow up with an L1 and then back, does a powerful rapid fire thrust combo that doesn't really bring the claw daggers into the equation much. And damn does it have the damage to bring down Nameless with little issue. So, the benefit of the second playthrough is that it taught Cervantes the timing on the lightning strike. It's still a split-second response, but knowing that there's enough time to chug in Estus and tank the hit can be the difference between life and death once Nameless gets into his 2.5 phase. So yeah, that's a point to Pirate, mostly as a result of going second and bringing in knowledge from the first attempts. Now it's time for everyone's favorite boss, the champion Gravetender. I might argue that this could have gone better with the Dark Drift on still instead of the Crow Talons. That being said, the Crow Talons are still able to stunlock the champion himself to blast through that part of the fight. Then the Great Wolf is fine. Sometimes the short range on the claws and the awkward hurt box of the Great Wolf causes some issues, but aggression and getting all up in the wolf's grundle can get us a win, with a spicy riposte to finish the fight with too. Epic send-off. Would it surprise anyone to know that the Crow Quills are not great against the Gravetender? To be honest, the Follower's Saber was way better at taking on NPCs like this, since it at least had an attack that could blast through shields. Still, while the Crowquill can get around the parry problem with its running L1, that's got a pretty high skill floor to hit with consistency. If you overshoot, then you'll probably get knocked out of the air, and if you undershoot, then you miss. Gauging the distance perfectly is very tough, and so, for the most part, I would simply send it and hope for the best. Granted, this Gravetender never really tries to parry me, so I was pretty consistently able to break through his defenses and poke him all I wanted. In fact, for once, it's the wolf that gives me the most trouble in this fight, killing me when I'm literally 2 hits away from getting the kill. Woof. Like big sigh, not dog woof. This is a Jerry, which is to say a bad doggo. No good woofers here. Alright, on a second attempt, we get it done. More annoying than difficult, and honestly, it's a bit of both. This one comes down to way more than a single death. The claws are simply much better suited for fighting the Gravetender NPC, and they weren't even that rough against the Great Wolf either. So this is an obvious point for Ninja, as the Crow Talons are peak PvP weapons and dominates player-like enemies. Can't wait for Halflight at this point. With a fight like Friede at the end of Ashes of Ariandel, I feel like DS3's first DLC really gets discredited for what it actually accomplished. Like sure, there's only 2 bosses, but the weapons both fighters have been using for the last few hours have been from here. And the areas to explore are vast, with tons of little trinkets to find. New weapons, ashes for the shop maiden, and even a PvP arena for the folks who like that stuff, and aren't the liquid festering shit of the earth like those scumbags that actually engage with the invasion mechanic. No, I do not think that was too harsh. Sorry, got distracted there for a second. Sister Friede, how's it go? Pretty well, in fact, after the requisite few deaths, that is. Once we start to get our bearings, however, Hanzo's mad swiping L2 can sometimes freeze Friede in place and gives us plentiful opportunity to not only deal some massive damage, but also build up a colossal amount of bleed. And that finally leads us to phase 2, but Friede is a bit of a strange fight, so let's look at Cervantes' success, or maybe lack thereof, during the first phase before we look at how both handle when this becomes the new template for ONS. Alright, phase 1 Friede. Well, once again, we've got the second playthrough buff here, meaning that Cervantes won't be needing multiple attempts on the first phase in order to get through to the second. No more getting caught by the invisible grab, and while I don't have the speed of the claw to fall back on, the rapier speed certainly has what it takes to keep Friede stun-locked for long enough to make it into the next phase. So yeah, so far, this is looking like an easy win for Cervantes, as he absolutely tears through phase 1. In that case, this has only been a quick detour before we get back to Hanzo. Alright, on the second phase, and after the difficulty getting through the first phase, I was not ready to have to burn my way through that a second time. So instead, Hanzo decides that he's going to rip right through Father Ariandel and Friede. Fortunately, the 2 bosses share the same health bar, and Ariandel is large enough that we can easily land some L2s on him. You know, if I don't completely miss and swing wildly for his farts instead of actually cutting up those legs. Honestly, compared to those failed attempts at phase 1, I can't express how cathartic it was to finish this phase off so quickly. So nice to have that behind us. Okay, back to Cervantes for the end of the fight. Well, hot damn, Cervantes also wanted to make sure that we didn't get a repeat of Hanzo's phase 1 do-overs. Even managed to get a good backstab while Friede was mid-heal. Otherwise, the normal strategy of hanging around Ariandel until he starts spamming AoEs always slaps here. I worried that the hitbox on the rapier wouldn't be able to land hits on Father Ariandel as well. Like, I get that he's got this massive hitbox, but sometimes the chair can get in the way, and FromSoft loves to pull this shit where the collision pushes the player out of range to actually land hits. It can get annoying, especially with weapons that don't have great range or wide swings, so it was nice to have such an easy time breaking the man down. So, with Friede and the father dead, I really have to give this one over to Cervantes. I mean, he really wanted this win, and even though he didn't have the same stun-locking capabilities as Hanzo's claws... What the hell is going on back there? Wait, but it already gave me a Titanite sled. The fight's over, right? Okay, fight's not over. Guess we're back to Hanzo. Well, the fake out is rough, but we've got this. The claws aren't planning on failing us now, and neither am I. Alright, we've got Black Flame Friede. How's this fight going to go? Well, a little good and a little rough, because Black Flame might honestly be the toughest boss in DS3 across both DLCs. Like, I know there's another guy folks are probably thinking of right now, but when it comes to whose moveset is harder to counter, I've gotta give it to this final phase, even if the numbers are technically higher on some other bosses coming up later. Still, Hanzo is feeling the stress of the prospect of having to redo the first phase all over again. And on this run, we've made it here with 13 Estus Flasks. That's quite a bit of weight in my favor. I lean on it hard for a win on my first dive into the deeper phases. Thank goodness I used up all those deaths in phase 1. So, how'd Cervantes handle the fake out third phase? And I was so close to. Oh, and would you look at that, after the first death, we wind up racking up some early phase deaths as Cervantes as well. Guess that second playthrough buff doesn't really work out when Friede is already this fucking difficult. Surely, this will go better once we get back to Black Flame Friede for a second time, ember up and apply some charcoal to the old crow quill. Interestingly enough, the buff doesn't apply the flame effect to the left-hand weapon. Although, since the game registers both weapons to be a single weapon, the claw daggers in my left hand still seem to get the effect, I believe. What isn't looking good is running out of Estus even faster than I had back in the first attempt. Wonderful. Clearly that means we're going to be getting a third attempt at Friede. How fucking nice for... Oh, she's dead. What do you know? How fucking nice for Cervantes. Alright, I've spent enough breath on this fight, so we'll give the point to Ninja right away. The L2 being able to freeze Friede in place at times was super nice. Risky, but if it paid off, it did so with interest. The Demon Prince multi-fight is honestly a rough one for me. This is often where a lot of my builds come to die. Kinda like Fire Giant in Elden Ring or Bed of Chaos in DS1. Like, these guys aren't unbeatable, and they're certainly learnable, but the fight is always such a long slog, it always pulls the wind right out of my sails every time I take a build into the DLC. Still, the claws are pretty good here, absolutely slicing these guys down. That being said, one aspect of skipping these guys so often is that I never remember which of the two princes that I want to kill first. I know I want to get the final phase to be the one that fires the laser, not the one that summons the sun to explode my face, but I have no idea which of the two it's supposed to be. Looks like it's supposed to be the demon in pain, and then we finish off the demon from below after the fact. From there, it's a slog through basically the same fight, but with a few stronger attacks and a slightly bigger version of the enemy. Cool. Definitely not going through the motions to get through this one. Certainly would suck if two of the best bosses in the game were locked behind this asshole. So, two major notes for the Demon Prince. One, somehow, Cervantes didn't manage to get the second playthrough buff against this guy, because I completely forget which of the two I'm supposed to kill first. This means that on my first run through this fight, or at least the first run that makes it to phase 2, I kill the demon from below first. And the attempt winds up burning through most of my available Estus on the way there. The result is fighting the passive fire orb summoning version of the final phase, with only 3 Estus flash charges to go through the entire fight. Obviously, I don't quite make it through with such limited resources. However, that has more to do with the second major note. Turns out the Crowquill's rapier has exactly small enough of a hitbox on the R1 thrust that a surprising number of my attacks completely miss, or deal heavily reduced damage. Fortunately, the L1's Claw Slash deals a considerable amount of slash damage, which the Demon Prince is weak to. And the arc of the attack is a lot better at landing hits than the rapier's thrust. Still, we reset a few times. Damn it. But eventually, we get that second phase with the laser, and it's all downhill from there. Right? Definitely didn't mess up at this point, right? Oh wait, I accidentally used the coiled sword fragment instead of an ember. I nearly ripped my own head off my fucking shoulders, holy shit. Okay, get back there again, and we finally get our damn win. So yeah, the scoring here mostly comes down to the claws actually hitting the boss more often than not. I'm not sure if there was some collision hitbox shenanigans or me being really bad with rapiers, but holy shit, it felt like I was flailing around until I started to focus with the left-handed claws for Cervantes. Terrible showing for this weapon, either for its ease of use or my ability to use it, and I'm certainly not discounting my own lack of familiarity with the weapon class. Regardless, point ninja and a major win for the Crow Talons, which deserve their time in the sun here. Unfortunately, this is the worst showing the Crow Quill will get, which I actually really liked for most of this playthrough, so I don't want them to be tarnished too much. Midir is one of those bosses that gets simpler the more you learn him. I mean, sure, he's intimidating at first, but he's really more of a test of patience than actual skill. Damn it, stop stomping me out like that, you lizard bastard. Okay, time to actually lock in. The trick for this guy is almost counterintuitive, especially if you're used to fighting the Elden Ring dragons, where you spend most of the time down by their legs, waiting for them to stagger so you can go for a few headshots and maybe a critical attack, or what most of us call a riposte. Instead, we want to be right up in Midir's face from start to finish. If he moves it away from us, then we need to run up and get back in that snout of his. Is it dangerous up here? Sure. Can all of his attacks be dodged? Absolutely. Will I always dodge them perfectly? Oh my no. Still, we've got plenty of Estus, 35 Vigor, and a pair of claws ready to rip this dragon apart. Oh, and it certainly helps that his health bar is technically a lie, and the last fifth or so goes down to the obligatory riposte we get towards the end of the fight. Not much else to say. This is still a war of attrition boss, and Cervantes is ready to sail on the high seas for months at a time before finding port. So attrition is something he can surely handle. Also, even though I do still run into some of the problems that come from the rapier's hitbox, the rapier itself is really good at piercing through Midir's hide, and his head is at least big enough that I rarely manage to miss if I'm not front and center. The result is a pretty substantial first try kill that has really helped to jump Midir a lot higher in my boss rankings these days. He's a solid dragon fight, and after dealing with the ricocheting ball fire from Elden Ring, he might be the best of the type that FromSoft has made to date. Sorry, Lanciax, Fortisax, and Placidusax, but it's the simple truth. This one is a bit strange, actually, as I'm pretty inclined to give this point to Pirate. Not only because of the first try kill, but also the damage and accuracy on the Crow Quill is better for this specific fight over the Crow Talons. Really nice to see the rapier succeed, actually, given how it had fallen short against the Demon Prince. With Midir taken down, it's finally time to change up our weapon again. This time, we'll be swapping back from the claws to the katana. In this case, we're going with the frayed blade, which we got from Midir's soul. Neat, been wanting to use a boss soul for a weapon up until now, but not many of them drop anything close to a katana or cutlass. Interestingly, I never knew that this was the katana that Halflight uses. So walking into the fight with a matching weapon was a bit of a surprise. And yeah, this katana is a lot of the reason why this guy is always such a pain in the ass, because the second I have it in my own hands, he goes down in no time. Seriously, I thought these claws were good for NPC bosses or also PvP, but like, look at this thing absolutely rip right through Halflight and his Painting Guardian Helper. We're back to another hold style of L2, but instead of a speedy quick draw and a parry, it's a blade beam and a massive combo that can stunlock NPCs. A quality weapon, I have to say. Probably the best time I've had against Halflight in a long time. I think that's a brand new sentence. Never been said before. Like DS2 is peak or Sekiro players are mature. We've moved on to the Dragonslayer's axe for the final three bosses, mostly because Hanzo traded his weapon out here, and Cervantes didn't want to be left behind. So yeah, this thing might be a bit large for a boarding axe, which should be more of a hatchet, but it's apparently one of the best axes in the game. That's mostly because it comes already enhanced with lightning damage and can be enhanced with resonance. So it can deal physical, lightning, and fire all at the same time. The weapon itself certainly does work. However, while the damage is on point and we have the Avalon back again, it's not exactly an easy fight. Of course, execution will get us through if the weapon won't make it easy on us. Specifically, we need to be very careful about how we attack when Halflight has his shield up. Likewise, we also need to be careful if he preps the hold on his own frayed blade. but with a little careful planning, we can quickly get through the rest of the fight. So yeah, while the massive damage of the Dragonslayer axe is juicy as hell, this is still a pretty easy point for Ninja. Having the same weapon as Halflight really evens the playing field, which then makes it a pretty easy fight for the player. This thing must be a monster in PvP. Too bad I hate From Software PvP, otherwise I might actually try using it there. Man, look at the damage of those claws, absolutely eating Gael up like he's eating the Pygmy Kings. Wait, that's not the claws? Why did it say claws in my notes? Well, this is why the scripting process is done with the footage next to me these days, not simply notes. Anyway, you know what? That's probably for the best. A good reset might let this script actually get off the ground. Alright, we've been here long enough. Let's skip some of the deaths and get straight to the winning run. It takes a while for us to get there. Like a long while. Okay, but on the actual run that gets the win, it becomes clear that my little critique on Midir really rings true for every boss in the Ring City DLC. They're all wars of attrition, where we really can't deal heavy enough damage to these dudes to win this in anything less than by offering bosses like Gael a death by 1,000 cuts. That being said, this is still super fun, and I really don't mind it taking forever to get through, since I simply enjoy going toe-to-toe with his moveset so much. After all that difficulty that Hanzo dealt with, would you believe that Cervantes gets this on the first try? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a slow process, and the Dragonslayer's axe fights completely different from the previous weapons we've been using up until this point with Cervantes. Still, after so long with a curved sword, then a rapier, swapping out to the axe is kind of a downgrade speed-wise, even if it is an upgrade on damage hit for hit. So yeah, I guess the DPS is mostly staying the same, but the much slower weapon really takes some time to get used to against the literal final few bosses of the entire game. However, as we can see, the learning curve isn't too bad, and I'm pretty familiar with using an axe for most of this game. So there's really no issue to be had here, even if it's slightly abrasive. Not gonna lie, the vibes on this one might have been more in the frayed blade's favor, and Cervantes is certainly getting the second playthrough advantage, although that advantage is somewhat double-edged, but the Dragonslayer's axe simply gets the job done here. That's a point to Pirate, because he simply got the win so much faster. Alright, finale time, against the Soul of Cinder, and I have all the new levels from having gone through both DLCs before getting here. So, that's already in Hanzo's favor. What's also in the ninja's favor is the RNG, especially in the first phase, which, let's be honest, is the part of the fight that's actually difficult. I mean, getting the mage as the first transformation when he was at like 2/3 of his health left, and then plowing through the curved sword pyromancer phase thanks to a nice stagger, couldn't hope for better luck in this fight. As for the Gwyn phase, well, it's Gwyn, but my character is at TS3 levels of speed and maneuverability. So yeah, his moveset really doesn't pose the same challenge that it does back in TS1. And the Frayed Blade is more than up to the task of taking him out from one phase to the next. Cervantes does not get the same benefit of RNG in this fight, although it isn't bad enough to deprive him of his first try kill. All this does is drag out the first phase a bit, as I get the curved sword pyromancer right off the bat, followed by the spear-wielding paladin class. Now, while I know most people tend to have the worst time with the pyromancer, I gotta admit that the paladin is the one that always trips me up the most. I'm so bad at reading that stupid spear with its pike charges and quick little stabs. Plus, I'm never a fan of a boss that can heal himself, but fortunately the boss decides to swap into the mage build for the last stretch of the first phase and give me an easy in towards the second one. Then, at that point, it's all downhill from there. I really can't say if this is an effect of the weapon classes themselves or the damage of the Frayed Blade in comparison to the Dragonslayer's axe, or if it really comes down to RNG. Either way, this is still a point for Ninja, mostly because the fight felt way better with a katana over the Dragonslayer's axe, even if both fights took about the same time. Granted, that favorable first phase might have had a lot to do with it as well. So it's time to head into final scoring, and to nobody's surprise, when I give the ninja access to katanas like they should reasonably have as samurai, not letting myself live that mistake down, it's pretty obvious who's going to come out on top. From Software simply makes these weapons too good in every game. And this was while I avoided some of the ones that are supposedly some of the strongest, like the Chaos Blade. But the actual final totals come out to 14 points for the ninja, with the pirate trailing behind with a mere 10 points after this whole adventure. Additionally, we also have a free point for Wolnir, Sigvard, and the basic concept of gravity. It's been quite a ride, hasn't it? As for the rest of the series, however, this brings the full score totals up to 74 for the ninja, with a commanding lead over the pirates' 63. At this point, this also solidifies Ninja's victory on game count, as Hanzo has now won DS1, DS2, DS3, and Demon Souls. Currently, Pirate is only leading in Bloodborne, and there's only one game left to go. However, with 207 boss encounters in the final game of our competition alone, this is still anyone's game, as a quality rapier or cutlass can potentially sweep enough to make up for the 11-point disparity between these two fighters. So, tune in next time for when Hanzo and Cervantes finish off their generational grudge match by heading into Elden Ring to finally decide which warrior truly reigns supreme. See you there. Hey, it's that time again, the end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon, link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge in the top tiers get their names read out, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.
But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness. Like embers linked by Lords past.